Hi, it looks like I'm live. Welcome to day one of Untangling Low Libido, my new free 3-day event that I'm hosting this week. As I give a few minutes at the beginning to let people see that I've gone live and to log in or not to join us, I am going to just remind you of the logistics for the week. So this week it's all about low libido challenges and finding some ways back to arousal. Today and Wednesday, I'm going live from this location from my personal Facebook page, and we'll be giving kind of a mini training on libido and issues surrounding libido, and some common causes and some ways to re-find or find anew your arousal. And then on Friday, I'm so excited about this. I've never done this before, so another cherry I get to pop with my friends that will be joining me. I am hosting a group coaching call on Friday, also at 4 p.m. Pacific time. Now I think it's, daylight savings time? I get very confused. All I know is my body is still a little messed up from the time change yesterday here in the US. So on Friday, I'll be hosting a group coaching call for female identified folks it'll be private, it'll be on Zoom. The only way to get access to it is to register for the event in advance, and I will be sending out the link to it on Thursday evening. To those folks that have registered, that I can confirm in some fashion that they are most likely female identified. And on that call, you get to bring your specific questions, challenges for me to give you targeted, specific support during the call. I'm really excited about this. I'm really looking forward to it. And even though the call is focused on female identified individuals, really low libido can affect all genders. Everyone can experience it. So I hope if this is something that you're struggling with or your partner is struggling with, regardless of whether or not you'll be joining us on Friday, that there is some value here today and Wednesday that you can take with you. And as I just mentioned, this can be a helpful thing to dig into and learn about, even if it's your partner rather than you that's struggling with the libido challenges, because it affects you too, right? And the more that we can understand what might be happening for our partners, the more empathetic and compassionate we can be. And if it's something that they're wanting to shift, then you might pick up some tips and pointers that you can share with them, or you can send them to the replays of the lives as well. All right, and so just to let you know my setup here, I've got my phone here, I've got some notes in my hand, so you might see me glancing down occasionally, and I also have my laptop set up over here so I can keep an eye on the time, and just have access to that as well. So I might occasionally glance over. I'm thinking that the lives today and Wednesday will go about 45 minutes. It might go to an hour. We'll see. This is the first time I'm delivering this content in this way, so it's a little bit of an experiment for me, but I think it'll be about 45 minutes. All right, yeah, let's dive in. So first, I just want to talk a little bit first about definitions to contextualize a bit. So low libido, loosely defined as a decreased interest in sexual activity. Now, this is relative, right? For some of you that can identify with this or know someone that's struggling with it, that could look like a number of different things. For some, it's a complete and total lack of interest in sex. For others, it's a significant decrease, what feels like a significant decrease to them after, many years of formerly what they thought of as a high libido. So it can look like any of those things. There's no magic number of how often you should be thinking about sex or interested in sex or trying to have sex. And there's no magic number of how many times you should be having sex to have a healthy sex life with your partner. It is all completely relative. To me, the important point is it causing you distress first and foremost, or is it causing your partner distress? Then it's worth looking at. Other than that, it's all perfect and good if it's serving you. But if it's not, whether whatever the rate is, however frequently or infrequently you think about sex or interested in it or want to have it or are having it, if it's causing you distress, then let's spend some time together on this issue. And I think that's just really important because I think people do look to see if there's like, oh, am I having sex enough? Are my partner and I having sex enough? And really, there is no answer to that. It's more about, well, is it as frequently as you want or as frequently as you used to have and you really enjoyed it and you'd like to get back there? Then it's worth digging into. And the second thing I like to start us off with is letting you know this is so common, so common. Libido can and often does fluctuate for people over the course of their lives and from year to year, depending on, or month to month, sometimes depending on what's going on. You know, sometimes those fluctuations are more extreme or they last longer, so they start to cause concern. But almost everyone has or will at some point. Not everyone, of course, there's always exceptions, but I think it's really common. And I've talked to the reason I decided to do this for the topic for this event is because I've talked with a number of folks recently who are struggling with low libido, and to a person, they're relieved when I tell them how common it is and some of the reasons why it's so common. Because I think when you're stuck in it, there's a sense of being wrong somehow. And the first thing I want to do is take a little bit of that pressure off and just let you know this is so common. The second thing I want to reassure you about is you're not broken. So if you are experiencing a significant downshift in your arousal, then especially in comparison to how you've experienced it before, you're not broken. You know, your body, your spirit, your psyche, they're simply going through some things that are disconnecting you from that arousal and your experience of it, and you can find your way back there. I feel very confident in this. You are not broken. This is simply something that you're going through and experiencing in this moment, and we can help you get back to the place that you want to be. All right, so over the course of today, so that's sort of the setup, and I'll reiterate a few of those points at the start of Wednesday as well. But for the main portion of my talk, I'm going to share with you some of those common causes of libido, as well as some ways to move forward. And there are basically two primary pathways to arousal that you can explore. One is physiological, so it's a somatic orientation, a somatic experiencing of your body and pleasure. That's what we're going to focus on today. And Wednesday, I'm going to talk about the second pathway, which is a psychological pathway. You know, there's a saying that the brain is the biggest sex organ, and it's no lie, and it's a really powerful path to arousal. But today, and I'll give some of the causes of low libido on Wednesday as well. I didn't want to cover them all today. I thought about it, but then as I was thinking through and kind of jotting down notes that I now have in my hand, it could get really depressing if I spent too long on all the causes, all the things that can dampen your arousal. And quite frankly, I didn't want to depress the fuck out of you. Sorry, I thought it was a funny joke. I don't know, maybe it's not. Anyway, so I'll do some of the causes today and some of them on Wednesday. You know, lives are really weird because I'm talking to a group of people and I can see I've got people online with me. Hi, everyone. But I don't get any or very little sort of reaction back. And so I'm used to giving these sorts of talks where I can see people's responses, and you can see I'm getting really red in the neck as I get a little embarrassed about my joke. Anyway, yes. I'll give you some of the causes today, and I'll give you some on Wednesday as well. Thank you, Leah, for the laughing face. I thought it was funny. Okay. It's very warm. All right, so first want to touch on one set of causes that can really play a role here, and that's a set of biological causes. So I'm going to talk about these, and in a few minutes I'll talk about some ways forward, but which is really brief, and it's basically going to be see your doctor. But I have a couple of other thoughts about it than just that. So one, of course, a whole host of medications can affect libido, right? So common ones are medications for depression or anxiety. Those can have an effect on libido. Someone mentioned to me recently, cancer medications can, a whole host of things. I am by no means an expert on this, which is why ultimately my advice related to this is going to be see your doctor. But just know that that's really common. And so if there is medication that's having an effect, there might be, not always, but there might be a way to tweak the medication. Regardless, so I think mental health is super important and health is super important. So there are some other ways to balance out libido challenges that medications can bring. But it's really important to know that there are physiological bases for these issues sometimes as well. So medication. Some chronic health issues can just take a toll on your body and naturally dampen your arousal. So high blood pressure, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, just to name a few. Those can also play a role. Fatigue, there are some chronic fatigue disorders and other issues that cause fatigue, and just life that can cause fatigue. And there can be some chemical, biological, hormonal shifts that are affecting fatigue. So all potential avenues to explore. Also, of course, hormonal shifts, right? You can be experiencing hormonal shifts during or just following pregnancy. If you breastfeed, that can cause a dampening of your libido. Super, super common. And of course, the one that I'm more thinking about, since I don't have kids and I've not experienced that way that libido can be affected, but I am in the age where I'm starting to see some signs of perimenopause, and hormones can shift as female bodies with female sex organs go into menopause, perimenopause, that stage of life, and that can dampen down arousal, those hormone shifts. Okay. Sorry, I put on Do Not Disturb on my phone and I'm still getting text messages. Sorry, I don't know how this happens. Technology is always a bit of a challenge for me, and each time I think I'm conquering it, I find I'm not. So anyway, I'm just gonna roll with it. That may happen again. I apologize in advance, and I'll see if I can figure out something else besides the Do Not Disturb feature on my phone that doesn't seem to be working. So, yeah, so hormone shifts are a real thing and can be a bit of a dampener on your libido. And also for a lot of folks, socialized female like myself, I grew up with this story that women hit later middle age, and go through menopause. And when they start the transition, as it's sometimes referred to, their sex drive crashes. And in fact, that's kind of the signaling of the end of their sex life. I sort of grew up with that message, and I feel like that's what the women I was surrounded with kind of moved through the world believing that, having a lot of language around that. Even if it was joking, it still is what I heard. And so I think that as our bodies start to experience those changes, if we have that story, if we were socialized with that story like I was, it can have that psychological effect on you. So it's sort of getting into Wednesday's territory a little bit, but you can go in thinking, oh, So that's what's happening now. That's my life. My sex life is just not going to be what it was. And we can kind of start to live as if that's a done deal, that that's the way it's going to be. And I just got to say that's bullshit. So I'll talk a little bit more about that at another time. But that can, both the hormonal shifts, which are physiological and real and can lower libido. And then if we start to believe that that means our best sex is behind us, we start to disconnect from our own internal sense of our erotic self. And that's a really critical piece that can happen. And finally, in the biological realm, some women experience pain during intercourse, and a lot, we're taught to ignore it, quite frankly. We're taught that our pain, well, first of all, we're taught that our pleasure doesn't matter. So if our pleasure doesn't matter, is the fact that we're having some discomfort or actual pain during sex really matter? If he's still, presuming a heteronormative context here, if he's still getting off. And I've talked to a lot of women who have a history of having had painful intercourse and just sort of ignored it. While sometimes dampening down the libido can be a natural protective mechanism against experiencing that pain on intercourse again and again. So that's just something to be aware of and to bring a lot of compassion to yourself around. Pause for a moment. And I mentioned fatigue, so lots of biological factors that can be coming into play here. Also, one of the biggest libido killers can just be the stressors of life, right? The day in and day out pressures of managing our overly scheduled, over busy lives. And in this current moment, we're all living through, for me at least, is what, I don't know of a bigger stressor, the pandemic, this collective stress, chronic stress and trauma that we're living through around this, the very real visceral fear of illness and death through it, the restrictions on our life, right? Yes, so big. We're stuck at home. Those of us that believe in science and care about not doing harm and keeping ourselves safe. We all have different risk levels, tolerances, but so many of us are staying at home, following the guidelines as best we can. And we're not touching the people we're used to touching. We're not in their spaces, in their energy. We're not going out and enjoying life in the ways we're used to. And we've had to literally cut ourselves off to many routes of pleasure. And the fact that there's so much low libido going on right now is so understandable. I feel like, don't quote me on this, I might be misremembering this, but I feel like I saw something online recently that said that we are projected to have a precipitous drop in our birth rate, right? Is this correct? I don't know if anyone knows this. I should have probably looked this up beforehand and been able to quote something. I'm not that prepared, obviously. But it would not surprise me. And I think maybe I'm latching onto it because it kind of fit with what I would have expected. If it is the case, pardon me, not at all surprised. Because it's really hard to stay connected to our sense of pleasure and desire for life-affirming activities when we're surrounded by the pandemic. So a huge, huge reason to maybe be experiencing some drops in your libido right now. And then the last bucket of causes of low libido that I want to touch on today is related to our connections with ourselves. And one of the reasons we can struggle to feel aroused, to have an interest in sexual pleasure and play, is because we've lost our connection with our physical bodies, with ourselves and our physical and emotional states. You know, I can really relate to this one. Before I got help with an intimacy coach, I was a master at disconnecting from myself. The only way I knew how to deal with my persistent psychological pain and sadness over my struggles with my sexuality and body image was to numb out. And I mean, occasionally I would numb out with food, occasionally with alcohol, but my biggest way of numbing out was through reading. I obsessively read series of books. And honestly, the introduction of e-readers was, I really just dove headfirst into that. And I would just read for hours upon hours upon hours when I wasn't working or in front of a friend. And I lived alone, so I had lots of alone time. And I just numbed myself out. And unfortunately, we can't numb out. We can't target that. It's kind of like when you work out, it's kind of a myth that you can target specific trouble spots in terms of like weight loss or what have you. Well, you can't numb out just the shitty feelings, the tough feelings, the shitty stories that are going on a loop in our head about ourselves that we struggle with. We can't just distract ourselves from that or disconnect from that. We disconnect from all or a huge chunk of our awareness of our physical bodies, of our emotional states and the nuances in them, which are huge elements of experiencing and expressing and engaging with arousal. So if you're someone who does that, and I don't know, quite frankly, I don't know anyone who doesn't do that. And again, during the pandemic, I'm doing a lot of that right now as well. It can, over time, really tank your libido as well. And related to that area of disconnection, if you have an experience of trauma in your past or multiple traumas in your past, one of the effects of that, it can be not feeling safe in your body. And so when you're not feeling safe in your body, it can be doesn't make it impossible to feel arousal. You can, and I know people who do. And it can make it that much more challenging. It's like a layering effect of all of these things coming in, right? Our resilience maybe is only so deep. And I think like in this pandemic, a year in, I know I'm running really thin on the ground in terms of my reserves in certain areas of my life. And I think that can happen in this space as well. All right. So there was a lot of time talking through some of the ways we can just very naturally get and find ourselves in a space of some significant low libido. And just want to bring lots of compassion and grace to you around this. It is not easy. It is super common, and we can absolutely find ways to reconnect with our arousal and our libido. And that's what we're going to talk about now. So first off, if you think, and so today I'm going to focus on some paths forward, some suggestions or things to think about or explore that are more physiologically related. And on Wednesday, I'll dive into some of the fundamental emotional stuff as well. So first off, if you think there's a biological component that could be playing a role, then, obviously see your doctor. I'm not a medical professional, and I would never want to advise you other than to see your doctor. Again, see about treating some chronic issues maybe that are getting in the way, causing some challenges. Maybe see if your medications can be adjusted if that's possible. I know that's not always possible. And the main thing I wanted to say, if you do go to see your physician about your libido struggles, to see if there's a pathway, some options that way, is if your doctor minimizes the importance of your low libido, of what you're experiencing, of minimizes your perceptions of it or how important it is. If it's at all a possibility, and I know this may not always be the case, but if it is at all a possibility, find another doctor, because your sex life, if it matters to you, it matters. If it's causing you distress or discomfort or shame or struggle, it's worth figuring out. And if the doctor you're currently seeing doesn't see that, then my honestly heartfelt, see if you can find another physician. Again, not everyone has that privilege, can do that. And so if they, first of all, have the privilege of having a doctor to go see, but if you do, and that's the reaction you get, know that your sex life matters. If it matters to you, it matters, and it's worth spending some time trying to figure out. All right, mini soapbox off of that at the moment. All right, in terms of what I normally spend more time on in terms of a physiological route to reigniting libido, the first thing I do is really, what I want to focus on is the importance of the agency that you have in this, right? Once we sort of factor in the influence of biological factors, otherwise you have and even there you have quite a bit of, I think you do have quite a bit of agency, but outside of that, it's each of our, as a sexual being, I think it's each of our responsibilities to maintain our own internal connection to an erotic spark within ourselves. When I was studying, I think it was in my Somatica coach training program, referred to it as a pilot light, right? So if you have a gas stove and you've got the pilot light, if it's out completely, then that oven is super cold and it's super hard to get, it's going to be that much more of an effort to get the oven to turn on and heat up, right? Whereas if the pilot light stays lit, it's a much lighter lift to go from a low burn ember. I'm not great at analogies, so I'm really mangling this one, I think, but hopefully you get the picture, right? If you've got that pilot lit, you can turn the oven on much quicker and easier and get it up to the temperature that you want. It may still take some time, and quite frankly, that's some of the fun can be, but it's that much easier. And we are the people, I maintain my own pilot light. So the first way I want to invite you into being curious and exploratory around shifting your libido and reconnecting to some arousal is in stoking that, turning that pilot, lighting it if it's completely damped down or off, completely disconnected, sort of bringing that back online. And so I want to today talk about some ways of doing that. I want to try and be as practical as possible. And near the end, I'm going to lead you through a short exercise that you can do to potentially help with that. And it's one I will do often in sessions with clients, and I will do just on my own because I find it super beneficial. Ooh, hello. Thank you for the heart. That was fun. All right. So first, to get that pilot light lit, to keep it lit, to keep it engaged, one of the things to experiment with is your connection to pleasure, your connection to and awareness, your mindfulness around pleasure. And I don't mean just sexual pleasure. Yes, that's an area, but I mean all, a broader definition of pleasure, right? So think about it. If you go throughout your day to day, days in a row, 23 hours a day, 23 and a half hours a day, or weeks at a time, without really being mindful to and connected to all sorts of pleasure, big and small, and then you want to have sex, and all of a sudden go from no awareness really to no physical somatic connection to what pleasure feels like and what pleases you. And I mean that also in a non-sexual way, what pleases you. And then you go to have sex it's a bit of a dissonance. It's like a whiplash cognitive dissonance thing. So there is a mindfulness practice that you can start to experiment with and play with to begin to sort of prime the pump for that pilot light. Honestly, I should probably stop with the analogy. I mean, I'm not sure what I'm doing with it at this point, but hopefully you get the picture. So some things I will do myself is, so like right now while I'm doing this live, I've got on this, you can kind of, no, that's my sweater. Can you see? I have like this fuzzy blanket on my chair. Oh, everything's backwards on the video. So this blanket covers my whole chair. And sometimes I'll sit here when I'm working or doing a session, or like when I do the lives, and it's a super fuzzy blanket. And I'll just sort of stroke the blanket and let my fingers notice the softness and how much I like the way that feels, right? You can step into the shower, and when you first step into the hot water, feeling it hit at your body, and notice how it hits different parts of your body and what that feels like. Another, and think about all the senses. I bought some flowers for myself recently, and sometimes I'll just pause and look at them and just sort of take a sip of the beauty of the flowers and kind of revel in that visual sensation of, hi Tevish, yes, fuzzy blankets are so sensual. Oh, they're so fabulous. I love them. And so I'll just sort of immerse myself in the aroma of the flowers, or how beautiful they look, or the sunlight coming through the leaves shining into my desk space. I'll pause that. I also keep a container of lotion on my desk that has this scent that I just adore and kind of turns me on a little bit too. And so every once in a while, I'll just, even if I don't need the lotion, I'll just put some on my hands so that it can be kind of surrounded by that scent for a little bit. And so one area to start to play with is taking a little bit of a journey, a senses and sensual journey, and be, I can be a little bit over-organized at times, and not all the time, obviously, but sometimes, and be like, all right, I'm going to do some visual plays right now. I'm going to look at what around me do I find beautiful and just pleasurable to look at. And I'll do the same with touch, with aroma, with sense, with sound, and just be open to that and be aware of it. And then the next step is to say, as I sit here and stroke the blanket, notice how my body reacts as I'm feeling that super soft, sensual blanket underneath my hand. And just notice the warmth that might come into my chest. I mean, I would notice it, except for right now, all over me is warm from, doing the live. But in ordinary times, I would probably notice that. I would notice my breath coming in and out of my body as I feel something that's like that I find really soft and sensual. So it's spending some time literally reconnecting to pleasure, because we can be so caught up in our day-to-day, all of the distractions, the to-dos, the things we need to get done, that we just don't notice these things. And we kind of wait for the big ones, like the big dinner out. Of course, now with the pandemic, how many big dinners out are there? And I was about to say, like, going to see a play or hear the symphony or something like that. And of course, all of those things are really not available to us right now, or at least not in the ways that we're used to. So we're not taking as much time, even for the big ways. And we can't always, even when they're available, manage to do the big ways. So this is about finding some of the more day-to-day, small things, ways to bring in pleasure to your life. And that's priming that pump for your pilot light. Because sexual pleasure, arousal is another form of pleasure, right? So if we have a pathway to noticing and experiencing pleasure of lots of sorts, it makes it that much easier. It's one step closer to connecting to our sexual arousal and our interest in sex. Okay, the next area that I want to spend a little bit of time on, and I'm cognizant of the time, and I want to make sure we have time at the end for the exercise. But first, I want to spend a little time talking about connecting to your body. I mean, all of these, they kind of overlap. They're not, I'm talking about them distinctly, but there's a lot of overlap in the Venn diagram, just to acknowledge that. So connecting to your body. All right, so what I think about with this is, now we're starting to get a little bit more directly sexual, which is, do you masturbate? Do you self-pleasure? How often do you do it? Is it always a utility? Sometimes I self-pleasure regularly, and a lot of the times it's fairly utilitarian. I get in, I do exactly what I know will get me off, I get myself off, I go about my day. And so I think that's kind of more utilitarian. It has its place, right? Just like a quickie has its place in our sexual repertoire. But if that's all we ever experience, we're not fully taking advantage. And for a lot of us, we're not even taking time for that very frequently or ever. I can remember, so like I say, normally self-pleasure on the regular, most days, sometimes, yes, most days. And at the start of the pandemic, I just stopped. Honestly, I didn't even notice for a few months that I hadn't masturbated for a while. And my libido just tanked. I was living alone at the time. I'm now living with a partner, so I am getting some touch, which helps a lot for that, just general touch. But in that super isolation, my normally high interest in sex, even when no one's there to immediately satisfy it other than my own sort of hands or toys, just tanked, gone. And I brought it back by purposefully self-pleasuring every morning for a couple of weeks, just to take some time to remind myself of what I enjoyed about my body and the kind of pleasure it has felt in the past. And whether or not I orgasmed wasn't really the point. It was taking the space and the time for myself and to reconnect to my body. And so that's something to think about. Now, life can be, especially if you have kids, finding that alone time, finding the chunk of time in there, but it's so worth it. This is where we get into a territory of, it's a little bit like a use it or lose it, or, use it or lessen it spaces, right? So I had stopped altogether, and I just lost my libido and my sense of the sensual and the erotic for a while. And when I became mindful about it and like, all right, I'm doing this, I may not even in this moment be feeling sexy or erotic at all. I'm just going to spend some time with myself. Over time, gradually, I came back to my normal libido, mostly normal. I mean, it's maybe not as high still as it has been in the past, because, life, the stressors are still there, the pandemic's still there, the stressors of, being a solopreneur and all of that, they're still there. But I found myself at odd points during the day getting aroused by things I would see or hear or a text message I would get from someone. So I got back to what felt to me like it's a decent libido for where I'm at right now. But I was definitely in that use it or lose it space. And so reconnecting to your body is another area to spend some time in and be curious about. And in fact, my teachers at the Somatic Institute wrote an article that I often will send to people. And I'm going to, once this is over, I'm going to pop a link into the comments. They have an article on conscious self-exploration. That's the term that they use for it. And it's a little bit of a guide about how to, especially if you have no, normal approach to self-pleasuring, or you do, but you have your way of doing it. It's a bit of a guide on some recommendations on how to approach it a little bit differently, to wake up some new awarenesses and pathways to things that might turn you on that you're not really thinking about or conscious of right now. And so anyway, it's a really helpful article. I'll pop it into the comments once I'm done here. I've seen people do it at the same time as they're actually on the live, and I have no capacity for that, so I'll do that later. All right, and the last area that I want to talk a little bit about, and this is where I'll lead you through the exercise at the end here, is connecting to breath. So connecting to breath, first of all, is just a great way to, right? Sex is a physical act, whether it's partner sex, solo sex, and breath is a great way to connect to our physical being. One of a common complaint that people will have, and I so struggled with this, was thinking too much during sex, getting distracted. Right? You're in the groove with someone, you're feeling really good, and then pesky thoughts come in. It can be on all different things, and it just pulls you out of that connection with the pleasure and with your partner. Well, breath and reconnecting to breath in those moments is a great way to get back in sync. And if you're struggling with low libido, then having a bit of a practice around connecting to breath can be super useful. And there's an exercise that I like to do with clients, and I will just, do on my own. And it's an erotic breathwork practice. And I want to take you through that here to close us out. So to do this, if you're watching live or just catching the replay on the go or what have you, this is a great exercise to do once you're somewhere settled where you can have a little bit of quiet and ability to focus, and maybe sit in a comfy place. And if that's not where you're at right now, maybe just listen along to see what the exercise is like, and grab the replay later and fast forward to minute like 44 is where we're at now, where we're starting the exercise. Maybe I'll put that in the comments too if you just want to fast forward to that section later. So the other thing I want to do is, if breathwork is new to you and this kind of erotic breathwork is a new exercise for you, just know, like, the way I take you through the exercise and the way I experience, it may look differently for you. That's okay. The first time I did this, countless number of times I did this, I didn't always have the full connection with it. And that's just part of the process of waking up a numbed connection to your body and to breath. So just know that's normal, and it's perfectly, like, you'll get past it. I'm going to lead you through, given time, I'm going to lead you through an abbreviated version of this exercise just so you see the trajectory of it. But when you go to do this on your own, you can spend more time in each of the three parts three parts of the exercise for even more better results. While I'm leading the exercise, at some point I'll be referring to my genitals and to your genitals as I'm leading you into it. I'll try and just use the word genitals for it, but when I'm leading this with people in front of me or individuals in front of me, I'll often, depending on their language comfort, their comfort with the language, I'll refer to pussy or cock, and because that's just what I normally do. And because I don't have you in front of me and I don't want to be too distracting, and of course I want to be all inclusive of all the genitals, I'm just going to try and use the word genital, but if I pop out and use something else, just know that, that's why that happens. And then the other term I'll use later on in the exercise is Kegels. And so I don't have to pop out and define that. I'll do that now, right? So Kegels, if you're not familiar with them, are that exercise that you can do with mindfully squeezing the muscles around your genitals, around the perineum and your ass. It's similar to when you go to cut off the flow of urination, those muscles, you squeeze them, release, squeeze, release, those are Kegels. So We're not going to do Kegel exercises in the breath work. Don't worry. But I'm going to invite you to do a squeezing that's similar to that, and I'll shorthand it by saying, you know, a Kegel squeeze. And I just wanted to define that before we go into the exercise. All right. So I'm looking at the time. So if you're following along at home and are going to do the exercise with me, settle in, get comfortable, settle into your seat. If you can, lean back so you feel supported in your seat. Just take a couple of breaths, normal breaths, whatever that looks like for you. When you're ready, I want to invite you to take a breath into your chest. And I like to place my hand where I'm breathing into, because that helps me direct the breath to the specific spots. This is something I started doing when I was first starting to do this exercise, and it was so new and a little unfamiliar and uncomfortable to me. So I find it really helpful, and I still do it often. I want to take a few breaths into the chest. For now, try just breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. Do a couple more breaths here. And when you're ready, shift your hand and your focus to your belly. And take your next deep breath into your belly. And as you breathe in, feel the belly expand and fill up with air. And as you breathe out, feel it contract and get smaller. Okay, we're going to take a few more breaths down into our bellies. One more into the belly. Now, your next breath in, we're going to take it down to your genitals. I like to shift my hand down there as well. It helps me guide my breath. Kind of just gently, lovingly cup your genitals. Breathe in, sending your breath straight down to your hand down there. And out. Continue taking your deep breaths in down to your genitals. And when I first started doing this exercise, it was hard at first. I wasn't able to actually feel my breath move past my belly. This was such a strange thing to do and to be guided into. I was a little uncomfortable. I kept with it and kept trying it, but just know, like, it's not uncommon. If the breath doesn't go all the way there at first, that's okay. It's perfect where you're at. And what you can experiment with is taking a few breaths in through the mouth and out through the mouth. And when you breathe in through your mouth, it's a little bit easier for that breath to go deep. And see what that's like, and if that feels any different to you. Let's do a couple more that way. If it's really uncomfortable or distracting trying to breathe in through the mouth, don't worry about it. Let it go. Breathe in through the nose. It's perfect as well. And as you breathe in, you're noticing down your body, down your torso to your genitals as your breath goes down. And as you exhale, feel yourself relax and sink into your seats. Maybe your body gets a little softer. And on your next full inhale, I want to invite you to do a pelvic squeeze as if you were doing a Kegel exercise. So squeeze those genital muscles and around the perineum. Squeeze on the in-breath. And release and relax the muscles on the out-breath. We're going to do a series of breaths doing that squeeze of the genitals on the in-breath and a release on the out-breath. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. And release on the out breath. In and squeeze. And release and relax on the out breath. Squeeze, squeeze. And release and relax. Squeeze and release. Squeeze and relax and release. This in breath and squeeze. Out breath and relax. Let's do a few more. I'm going to make it go a little bit faster. In breath and squeeze and release on the out breath. And on this next one, squeeze all your muscles. Squeeze as many as you can. Squeeze your legs and your arms. You be squeezing and squeeze. Squeeze and hold, squeeze and hold, squeeze and hold. And release. And relax. And just notice what you notice about your body in this moment. And let your body return to normal breath. And just pause in that normal breath and notice what your body feels. And do you feel any areas get a little tingly or warm? Where did you feel the breath go to? And just notice without judgment. Whatever you felt or didn't feel, wherever the breath went is perfect. It's where you're at today. And as you do return to this breathwork exercise, you might notice other things in future exercises, experiences of it. And it can be a little weird. I'm in a live, you're listening to me, but I'm not able to sync with your breath. So it might feel a little bit different. So that exercise, I gave, not, as I said, it's an abbreviated version of it, because I'm coming up on the end of an hour and I did not want us to go over an hour for this live. I will, I have instructions for that exercise. I need to get them loaded onto a site where I can give you a link to the PDF. And so you can do this at home. You can either fast forward through the replay up to about minute 44 and have me guide you through it again, or you can download the instructions that I will load up. If not today, I'll get them into the comments of the live and maybe just post on my page as well. I'll see about that. I'm not sure how to do that. Sorry, my body is really enjoying the sensations that I experienced doing that breathwork exercise. It always relaxes me and turns me on at the same time. And so my brain is starting to shut down because I'm just basking in the yummy feelings. And again, if you are experiencing some of that yumminess, beautiful, perfect. And if you're not, that's perfect too. It's a new thing for your body. So good, right, Thomas? This is such a great exercise. Oh, all right. I'm going to wrap up there. I will, shoot me any questions or comments you have in the comment section or in a direct message to me. That's welcome. You can also shoot me an email. My email is gretchen@gretchenshanks.com. So if you know my name, pretty easy to remember the address. And on Wednesday, I will be talking to you about a few more causes of low libido, and then we'll dig into some ways to explore a psychological pathway back to your arousal. Yeah, and if you haven't registered yet, please do. I'll send you reminders about the lives and the different events, and I'll also send you links to the replays. And if you're female identified, I'll send you a link to join me on Friday for the group coaching call. I am so excited about that. All right, so that's it for today. I will see you on Wednesday. Bye.